Escape of the Palisman had an interesting twist with the revelation that the Bat Queen is a Palisman. And not only that, but she was a Palisman that once belonged to a giant. However, after being broken, she was discarded and forgotten. Thus, she dedicated her life protecting other Palismen who were also discarded and forgotten. Now, upon the revelation that the Bat Queen belonged to a giant, my immediate thought, along with everyone else, was the giant that makes up the Boiling Isles, the Bat Queen's owner. So I thought I would break down what we know about Palisman, the Bat Queen, and the Bones of the Isles to see how probable that theory is. We'll start off first with Palisman, and honestly, Palisman are still somewhat of a mystery to us. The only Palisman we have seen in the show thus far are Albert, the Bat Queen, and the Broken Palisman in the forest. We know that witches have a palisman attached to the top of their staves via an interlock. This ensures that palisman can only rest atop one witch's staff. Though, as we see in the Bat Queen's case, a palisman can be discarded and presumably another one can be created to fit atop a staff. Speaking of creating though, we also know that palisman are created by their witches, or at the very least, Ida created Albert. However, I think it's safe to say that witches in general do in fact create their own palisman. We see that Ida's sister Lilith has a white raven atop her staff, and Lilith has heavy raven symbolism as seen in Convention with her mask, and also the two giant ravens she created during her speech. So I think it's safe to say that witches create their own palisman, especially considering the tight bond that we see Ida and Albert have. Palisman also seem to act as familiars to witches. In Albert's case, Ida created him from the branch of an ancient tree. So from this, we can assume that other palismen are also created from this tree. And considering what Ida said in Witches Before Wizards, it's likely that getting a staff and palisman are seen as a final trial to witches in creating their own palisman from this ancient tree, which I am assuming is a challenging and dangerous trial. So with palisman out of the way, let's go over what we know about the Bat Queen. One of the most interesting things to consider with the Bat Queen is that it seems no one knows that she is a palisman. Even Ida refers to her as a demon and not a palisman in Lost in Language. Which makes me wonder, is the Bat Queen created to resemble the appearance of a bat-like demon? We know from King and his demon books that there are certain species of demons. And since palismen are created from the bark of a tree, then I'm assuming that they can't reproduce. Although this is a magical world, so who knows. But if the Bat Queen was a palisman made to resemble the appearance of a bat-like demon, then that could explain how she has 3 children. If these 3 are actual bat demons who for whatever reasons were abandoned, then I could definitely see the Bat Queen taking care of them, given to how she already takes care of all the discarded palismen. That, or perhaps these bat children are also discarded palismen that she looks out for, although she clearly treats them differently than the other palismen as we see in episode 10. And there is definitely a more maternal aspect in how she acts around them. But this brings us to the Bat Queen's relationship with her former owner. When Luce asks if the Bat Queen knows what happened to her owner, she doesn't know. Now, she says it's been thousands of years. This would also explain why people believe she is a demon, because she has existed and lived far longer than most residents of the Boiling Isles. But this also tells us that her owner is likely not the Bones of the Isles. Considering that everything is taking place on the Boiling Isles, I find it hard to believe that the Bat Queen wouldn't know that her former owner died, and she along with everyone else is now living on their rotting corpse. Which also brings up the point of the amount of time that would be needed to pass in order for a corpse to decompose. Considering how big the Boiling Isles is, a lot of time would need to pass in order for it to become a skeleton. The Bat Queen says it's been thousands of years since she last saw her owner, and that's somewhat vague. But I feel the time in which the Boiling Isles giant was decomposing, the Bat Queen would have been able to determine if it was her former owner or not. But this brings us to the next point of the size and scale of a palisman. As we see with Albert, he is about the size to fit in the palm of someone's hand. His size never shifts or changes, this is just the size he is. Now look at the Bat Queen. Sure, she is much larger than the other characters in the show, but she is nowhere near the size to fit into the palm of the Boiling Isles giant's hand. Looking at this wide shot of the Boiling Isles, you can see buildings and towns to give you a sense of scale for how large the skeleton actually is. So if the Boiling Isles giant did in fact have a staff and palisman, then the palisman would be much larger than the Bat Queen. But considering that Luce offered to help find the Bat Queen's owner, we'll definitely come back to this at some point in the series. We have yet to meet any giants in the show, but with how the mystery of the Bat Queen is being set up, especially when you also think about that skull whistle that she gave Ida, then I am sure both she and whoever her former owner are will play an important role in the show. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day, and until next time, guys, take care.